Welcome to today's presentation, the Paycheck Protection Program Loan Forgiveness Overview. Many business owners at this time have, they've received funding from the PPP Loan Program and will in the coming weeks be ready to start the forgiveness process. So in this presentation, we will provide an overview of that forgiveness process and give you some suggestions on how to prepare. Now, my name is Paula Whittigand. I'm a business analyst with the Maricopa Small Business Development Center. I've been a counselor with the SBDC now for just about 4 years, and I'm happy to be with you today to share this content. In addition to my colleagues who are joining us, I'll have each of them introduce themselves, starting with Tom Fulcher.
Hi, my name is Tom Fulcher. I'm a business analyst with Maricopa SBDC. Been here 11 years. In addition to working with all types of businesses, I also have a specialty in helping in export.
And Mike Bull.
Hi, good afternoon. Thanks, Paula. And my name is Mike Bull. I've been with the SBDC coming up on 2 years. I am a generalist business analyst, and I cover mostly the West Valley.
Michael Cohen.
Hey, everyone. Michael Cohen. I am a business analyst with the Maricopa SBDC as well. I have worked in the world of SBDC now for 9 years. And I specialize primarily in the Northwest Valley area, particularly the city of Peoria.
And Marcus Brown.
Hey everybody, my name is Marcus Brown. I've been a business analyst with Maricopa SBDC for nearly 2 years now. I cover the East Valley and all the entrepreneurs in that particular area.
All right, terrific. Thanks for that. All right, now before we jump into our PPP content, let me just give a brief introduction to the SBDC services. For those of you who are not yet working with us, not familiar with us, we are the Maricopa Small Business Development Center, part of America's SBDC Arizona network. The main service that we provide is no-fee counseling to small businesses in any industry. And we also offer no-cost or no-fee training such as this. And we provide some great research tools, resource tools for our small business clients. We're able to provide this no-fee counseling because we are funded by the Small Business Administration at the federal level, and then here locally by Maricopa Community Colleges. So although we're all working virtually now, we all have office space, typically at the Maricopa Community College campuses. However, Michael Cohen, as he mentioned, is out of the city of Peoria. So we help our small businesses in a variety of areas. Of course, right now, we're really focused on helping our clients navigate the disaster loan programs. And now as we move into this forgiveness process with PPP, we're helping them with that. But in addition, outside, we have clients that are looking for additional funding sources. We help our clients get lender ready before they approach the lender. We're moving into this stage of now, how do we continue our business, sustain our business, make it more resilient? So we're working with our clients on that. But we have also experts in many areas of expertise. Export and international trade is one. Our PTAC division is expert in government contracting and many, many different areas of business development. So hopefully you will check us out, and at the end of this presentation, we will share with you how to request our counseling services. Now, let's just very briefly touch back on what this PPP program was. So the intent of the Paycheck Protection Program Loan Program was to help employers keep their employees on staff, basically, while this COVID pandemic is going on. Businesses would apply through approved SBA lenders, and the intent was, as long as they followed the guidelines of the program, 100% of this loan would be forgiven. And there are specific ways that you needed to use the funds, and we'll be going through that later here in the content. And then any amount not used, not forgiven, is converted to a loan at 1% for a term of up to 5 years, with the first payment deferred for 1 year, and there's no prepayment penalties. So that's just a very quick review of what the Paycheck Protection Program is. So with that, keep in mind that we're sharing with you today what we know about the forgiveness process. Things sometimes are changing on a daily, weekly basis. So we'll share with you what we know today, but just know that there may be some future changes coming. So with that, let's transition to our first topic and bring Mike Bull back. And let's talk about the forgiveness process. So Mike, take us through, when do these business owners need to actually submit their application, their forgiveness application?
Yeah, Paula, I think we see a lot of anxiety out there in the small business owner world because people have taken this loan and now they want to make sure it gets forgiven, because the worst thing that could happen is you take this loan and somehow you find out that some reason it's not going to be. So a lot of people are asking, hey, I want to get my application in. I want to make sure I know what's going on. The date we have now, and this is something that, as you alluded to, things change and we're never sure exactly until it actually happens. But August the 10th is the date we have been given that lenders can start accepting the applications and start processing them with the SBA. As a small business owner, you can file an application for forgiveness from that date forward. You have up to 10 months after your covered period in order to file it before it does turn into a loan.
Okay. Now, what kind of at the high level, you started to touch a little bit on the process, but maybe just overview the process. Where do I go to get the application? When do I talk to my lender? Kind of talk us through a little bit of that.
So there's, at this point, a process is you have to fill out an application. The SBA has produced applications. It's called a Form 3508. There's actually two applications. One is, as usual, you've got the long form and then you have the easy form. Mm-hmm. So the 3508 EZ is something that if you can qualify to fill that out, you're going to want to, because as it states, it's a lot easier. To qualify, you have to meet one of three conditions. Number one, either you're self-employed, you're an independent contractor, you're a sole proprietor, you had no employees at the time of your application, and you still don't have employees, you can use the EZ form. The second group would be those people who did have employees and have not reduced any wages by more than 25% since the pandemic began. And you haven't reduced the average number of employees or the hours they're working. You can use the easy form. The third section is small business owners who have not reduced wages by more than 25% during the covered period, and they had to shut down or had their hours limited because of requirements being in compliance with some of the regulations locally and federally. Where you can get the application, you can certainly Google 3508 and you'll get it, but SBA.gov, Treasury.gov, and our Maricopa-SBDC.com website all have applications that you can download.
Okay, great. And at the very end of this presentation, we have a slide that lists all three of those locations. So we'll give that to you at the end of this presentation. Okay.
Paula, I might also want to mention that once you do have it filled out, it's going to be your lender who you send it to, the person you got or the institution you got the loan from. Once you send it to them, they will all have different methods of accepting them. I would guess most of them will be online, so you'll be looking at their web portals.
So, and I would imagine once you've used all of the funding that you've received, contacting your lender to let them know that you're ready to start that process would be a good step early on as well.
Yes, keeping in touch is always good.
Okay. All right, thank you, Mike. Marcus is going to take us through some more information here that you find on this application. So Marcus, talk to us about this 8-week versus 24-week time period and the use of those PPP monies.
Right, so it can be a little confusing between the 8 weeks and the 24 weeks. The basic way of figuring out how you determine which one you apply for is just remembering the key fact that all PPP loans require that a borrower spends all the loan funds on either payroll or approved non-payroll expenses during a specific coverage period of time to ensure forgiveness. Now, all loans dispersed before June 5th, dispersed meaning you obtain the loan either in your bank account or you receive it in your hand, were put on an automatic 8-week coverage period, and they're expected to be paid off as such. However, as of June the 5th, all PPP loans are now on an automatic 24-week period to spend all the money. And as a result of the Paycheck Protection Program Flexibility Act of 2020, the PPP loan for all borrowers who received a loan prior to June 5th, if they want to, they have the option to now convert their loan coverage period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks, or 56 days to 168 days. Let me give you an example. Let's say I'm a business owner and I applied for the PPP loan and I retained it or obtained it by June the 4th. Now, because it was received before June the 5th, I am underneath the 8-week period, and I had to make sure I disperse all my monies out by July the 30th. Now, if I needed more time to make all those payments out, I can always speak directly to my lender and say to them, I would like to extend my period from 8 weeks to 24 weeks and make my deadline period from July the 30th of the 8-week period to November the 19th of the 24-week period. But on the application itself, whenever you're applying for anything forgiveness related, you're going to ask for put in the new adjusted date.
Okay, great. That helps to make it a bit more clear about which one do I choose. And you're not bound to the 8-week. Now, with the recent changes, there's more flexibility for business owners to use that money and to be able to get that forgiveness, to reach that forgiveness level. Okay. Now, so in the application, it talks about some more terminology, right? Covered period versus alternate covered period. So just kind of take us through that, just to reinforce the difference between those two.
Sure. So in the last section, we talked briefly about the covered period being anywhere between 8 weeks or the option of 24 weeks in the application. The difference between the two is while the initial covered period begins on the day you receive the loan, the alternate covered period actually allows the borrower to start their period of paying for payroll on the date that their payroll is being ran. So in other words, let's say that you have payroll running possibly a week after your disbursement. You have the option to opt into it a week afterward for a different cover period. So in my situation, let's say if my business receives a PPP loan on June the 4th, but I am on a bi-weekly schedule with payroll and I won't be able to make my first payment till June the 11th, I have the option to opt into the alternative cover period beginning on June the 11th to make it more inconvenient for me. But just keep in mind for me when applying for PPP forgiveness, instead of filling out the cover period section, I'm actually going to fill out the alternative period section.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Good. So that takes us through some of the forgiveness process and some of that terminology, which can be a little confusing. All right. Thanks, Marcus. Let's move into use of funds, right? And Tom Fulcher is going to take us through this somewhat detailed content about how we use those funds and what those funds are. So Tom, tell us, let's start off with payroll, right? Payroll costs. Take us through the details of what's included in that.
Happy to, Paula. And as you said, it can be quite detailed, so I'll try to keep it simple. There are 4 main components of payroll costs. The first is salary or cash compensation. As you may recall, when you applied for the loan, that meant any one employee was limited to a $100,000 cap. So in the covered period, that will translate down to a lesser amount. The other parts are the retirement benefits and state and local taxes and healthcare costs paid by the employer. And those can be added in most cases to that salary or cash compensation. But it does vary by entity type, especially for owners.
Okay. Now, so let's talk about those owners, right? So what do you mean when it says varies by owners?
Sure. Owners of businesses live under a different set of rules than non-owner employees. For the owners, looking at my notes here, if it's a C Corp, for example, it's that cash compensation plus the retirement benefits and health insurance paid by the employer. If it's an owner of an S Corp, It's the cash compensation, but in that case, health insurance is counted as part of the cash compensation, so it's subject to the limit, and then you can have retirement benefits on top of it. If you're a Schedule C filer or a Schedule F filer, then it's a percentage. If you're using the 8-week period or the 24-week period, it's a percentage of that over a full year for 2019 multiplied by your 2019 earnings. But it is capped at either 15,385 if you use 8 weeks or 20,833 if you use the 24 weeks period.
Okay, so really just to simplify and summarize, right, the rules for the owners are different than non-owner employees, and they can vary by the entity type.
Absolutely. Whereas non-owner employees, if you've elected for a 24-week period and you're a Schedule C filer, your non-owner employee cash compensation can go all the way up to $46,154. But that's only for those who file on a Schedule C or Schedule F. The SBA really hasn't issued changed guidance for others, so that's still subject to that 15,385 rule.
Okay, okay. Now, what about non-owner employees? I think maybe you just talked about that particular category. Okay, good. All right. So let's talk about how much must be spent on payroll and then move into those non-payroll expenses.
Sure. So you have to spend, under the new rules, at least 60% of what you claim for forgiveness on payroll expenses. And that's pretty easy. If you spent less than 60% of the total amount of the loan, you just take what you have spent and divide it by 0.6, and that gives you your new maximum forgiveness amount.
Okay, and so let's go through those non-payroll expenses then.
Sure. So there's a variety, and there's, in this whole thing, there's forgivable and allowable, but the forgivable non-payroll are up to 40% you can spend on these. So it's, the basic utilities, electric, gas, and water, right? And then on top of that, your internet service provider costs, and that's not your techs that run everything for you, just the ISP costs, your phone services, rent or lease payments on real or personal property of the business, and interest portion of payments on mortgages. In addition, there's something called transportation, which has no written guidance, but we received a little verbal guidance the other day that will probably be considered as fuel for business expenses. So those are all those non-payroll expenses that can constitute the 40% that you claim for forgiveness.
Okay, good. Limited list, but very, very, very concise about how to use the monies. Just remember to keep track of everything that you're spending. Keep good documentation on that. And just remember the PPP is not intended, right, to let you undertake new expenses that didn't previously exist. So just remember to keep that in mind as well. Also, a couple of tips here is, if you have a CPA, financial or legal advisor, certainly doesn't hurt to reach out to them as you're going through this process, especially if you're having to use the more complicated, complete form, that forgiveness form. Avoid double dipping or paying some of the same expenses, that economic injury disaster loan. If you received one of those and a PPP loan, you don't want to double dip and overlap using those monies for the same expenses at the same period of time. And then just remember that, while some expenses may be allowable, they may not be forgivable. All right, Tom, anything more to add before we move on and have Michael take us through the record keeping and the forgiveness criteria?
No, it's a complicated area. As you said, get help, and certainly call on us to help as well.
All right, great. All right, Michael Cohen, let's talk about this loan conversion element and record keeping. So what happens if, I don't meet the loan forgiveness criteria and the loan's not forgiven?
Well, we hope that you've kept good records during this period of time. Needless to say, that's always good small business practice, whether there's a pandemic or not. But in this case, you need to have kept very good records, particularly as they pertain to your employees. So if you're using a third party to take care of payroll, obviously the records are going to be fine. If you take care of payroll yourself, then make sure that those records are very clear. Before you really file for the forgiveness, you want to be absolutely sure of any forgiveness that you don't think you're going to be able to cover before you are going to take on the responsibility of that being converted to an actual loan. So we're under the understanding that because they've made so many changes in the forgiveness. For example, 75% employee costs down to 60%, and a lot of differences about what's acceptable as utility, what isn't acceptable as utility. Ultimately, I think a lot of our clients are going to find out that they can get a lot more of it forgiven than they may have originally thought. So make sure that you've taken advantage of all of those things before you file it with the intention that some of it is going to actually convert to a loan. Now, in the event that you do have an unforgivable portion, keep in mind that your repayment schedule is amortized over a period of 5 years, and it's at an interest rate of only 1%. So your first payment will be due no sooner than 6 months from the date of your forgiveness application from when it's filed, but it could be longer depending on the interaction between your bank and the SBA. Plus, as we've heard already in this session, that you don't have to file for that forgiveness right away. You have time to do that. So if you take that into account, plus 6 weeks, at least, you're looking at a pretty long time before you actually have to make that very first loan payment. Now, in the event that you don't think that you can have any of it forgiven, which I think is a very small percentage, at the end of 10 months from the time that it's funded, you will have to start making the payments. So if you don't do anything, the loan starts in 10 months.
Okay, all right. Now, obviously, there probably are going to be some record keeping required around this. So talk us through what that record keeping requirement is as we know today.
So the record keeping requirement for your PPP loan forgiveness is going to be 6 years, which is pretty common with these types of loans. Mm-hmm. So make sure that whatever you do in order to fill out your application for forgiveness, all that data needs to be retained for at least 6 years. So let's say that you end up converting some of that to an actual loan. You've got to make sure that that loan is used for authorized purposes. So that would include payroll that goes beyond your 8 or 12-week period, and you can also use it for acceptable, normal operating expenses.
Okay.
So an example of what you don't want to do would be that you applied for, received a PPP loan, you didn't use it for applicable purposes, so you converted it into a 1% loan, and then you use that funding for an unauthorized expense. So in other words, let's say you basically turned it into a 1% loan on a new vehicle. Okay, that's not allowed. So you could get into major trouble for that. So assuming then that you take the loan and you amortize it over the full 5 years and you keep those records for another 6 years, that means you have to keep those records until 2031 or 11 years from now.
Okay. Important to know and plan for. So I think as a final question, let's talk about, how does that economic injury disaster loan, that advance grant that many businesses got, now how does that impact this PPP forgiveness process?
This is a little more complicated than meets the eye, because we know that some people got idle money before they got PPP, other people got PPP before they got idle money, and there is some relationship between the two. So essentially, if you got an idle advance, that will affect the amount of forgiveness that you would have on a PPP loan. So here would be an example. You get a PPP loan for $100,000. Let's say your company only qualified for $90,000 of it being forgiven. If your idle advance was $5,000 because you had 5 employees, then the final amount of your forgiveness, instead of being $90,000, would only be $85,000. So it's a little complex. However, for a lot of our clients, they're going to be able to get the entire PPP forgiven, so it probably won't be a factor. But as you can see, it could be.
Right. Okay. Thank you for explaining that. So that takes us through the main point of our content and the forgiveness process. So let's just kind of transition to the conclusion here. And if I would have all of my colleagues come back on, and I will go ahead and share a couple of additional screens for you here. But first, I think I just want to share with you, it's a difficult time right now, and our clients, all small businesses, are really facing some challenges. So just as some words of encouragement, stay focused on what's important for your business. Do what's right for your business, your employees, and yourself. Just kind of take it day by day. The SBDC is here. Like I said, it's no-fee counseling services. We're helping many small businesses right now. So we would love to, see you and talk to you and see what we can do to help you through this time. But change is constant also. So we shared with you what we know today. It may very well change tomorrow, but at least you have some good information to start to prepare for this forgiveness process. So let me go ahead and just share with you again our slide that shows you where to find those documents that we were talking about. So let me see if I can get to the right mode here. So here you go. On the screen, you'll see it's the U.S. Department of Treasury. You will find application forms, instructions, the official interim final rules, those guidance documents that give you all the detail you'd ever want to know about the program. The U.S. Small Business Administration, SBA.gov, you will find the information there. And of course, at Maricopa SBDC, we do have a COVID tab. So we have the links to these programs and information on our website, in addition to a lot of other resources that you may find helpful to you, specifically, during this time of the COVID pandemic. So please make sure you check us out at Maricopa SBDC. Now, to request counseling, just go to that main page and look for the request counseling link. It's pretty easy. You just fill in a simple one-page form online that puts you into the system, and you'll be assigned a lead counselor. And we typically, sit down with our new clients in an initial counseling session, learn about your business, and talk to you about what some of the challenges, maybe some of the gaps and opportunities you have, and see how our services can help fill some of those needs as far as that small business counseling and development. So we hope to see you soon. And here again on the screen is our main page. And also, I'd encourage you to follow us on that social media, because we do offer other training programs. And as things change and are updated, if you are in our list, then you'll kind of be in the know, because you'll get those notifications, and you can use us as a key resource of staying on top of changes in these programs. So thank you for attending today.